Hi, I'm Reed, and for Folklore Thursdays, I do videos on using folklore, social custom, history, religion, all that cool stuff for our ttrpg games and our D&D games. Christmas! It's 24th today, a time of celebration and togetherness and the understanding that we survived another year and that we're coming through the darkness. Our Redeemer has been born, and everything will be right with the world. But Christmas now is just dreary capitalist nonsense, which makes it even worse that it's very divorced from the fact that, short of Halloween, Christmas was always the scariest time. It was always a celebration that always was tinged with the supernatural and with the coming of gods and with the darkest days of the year. And even though this is a time where supernatural good came to earth, well, the dark wasn't completely vanquished. Xmas was always a time of ghost stories and of creepiness. There's a reason why Dickens is always played in a terrible film about this time of years. Christmas was always creepy. And we will have that back, man, child. We will have it all back. We can make Christmas scary again. So, here's 5 Christmas horrors you can use and 5 adventure ideas. Let's go. Long-time listeners to the channel will also remember I just had some surgery, so I moved behind the ball. So if I'm mispronouncing stuff and getting it all wrong, there we go. Anyway, number 1. In Iceland, there is the legend of a great ogress by the name of Grilla. She lives in a cave close by. And Grilla is that very ancient archetype. She is the evil witch who likes to take children and put them in a pot and make stew out of them. The classics never die. Grilla has some unusual features. She has 13 large adult sons who are also ogres, but she's probably most famous for her most fearsome companion, the Yule cat. Now, Christmas Eve in Iceland, the saying goes, is that the Yule cat, a great black thing, big as a lion, stalks, and it goes through the streets of the cities and the villages, and it looks in on children. And if you don't have new clothes because you were bad, the Yule cat will bust in, and he will eat you. And if you were good but you didn't get new clothes, you just really have to hope that God forgives you for being born poor. I don't make the rules, man. So anyway, I love this idea of like the entire town just getting really, really quiet and just hoping that the cat will understand this one time that you were too poor to get a new jacket. You were too poor to get a dress for Christmas. And it's stalking, great green eyes looking in. Adventure ideas, therefore, are pretty straightforward. Your party is hired to stave off the Yule cat. You need to stake it out, be ready for it, take care of it. Or maybe your party stumbles into town one night in the snow and the ice and you're desperate, so you've got to get lodging wherever you can. But the village is very, very poor, so no one has new clothes. Everyone is going to die that night unless you save them. Or perhaps your party has to do something a bit different and learn to sew and make clothes for people. Either way, I think you can get an adventure out of a town after midnight, lights and decorations and flurries of snow, and then the cat stalks, and really get a cat and mouse, so to speak, game out of it. You're walking, you see the great footprints. In the distance, a child scream, the Yule cat has struck again. Number 2. Père Fouettard, or Father Whipper, like one who whips, is a Swiss kind of Krampus. Evil outsiders are common to Santa Claus legends, but I think this is the best one. Whipper, I'm going to call him Whipper, although everyone else would call him Fouettard because I'm not mangling Frenching him with my bogan Australian accent. It's a medieval story. It's actually a bit more complicated than what I'm going to talk about here because there's a whole thing with a guild of tanners, actually, the guys who take skins off animals, turn them into leather. But anyway, so Whipper, he is an innkeeper, or mainly he's also called a butcher. And I'm going to say butcher because it's much scarier. So one day, Whipper, he sees 3 rich kids on his way to school. And you got to remember, put this in context. In this, that means the rich are better. The rich are, because they have money, come from better families, they have better blood, all the rest of it. So this is a transgression. He's killing morally good people. Because he robs them, he slits their throats, and he drops them in a barrel. Later on, St. Nicholas is in town, and because he's got magic saint powers, he finds the bodies, and he resurrects them with his occult necromancy, which is not something that tends to get put into Tim Allen movies, because yes, in some traditions, Santa Claus is a wandering necromancer. And he forces Father Whipper to pay off his sins by coming and serving St. Nicholas and becoming a sadistic folkloric figure who applies ghoulish ironic punishment to naughty kids. He's the talk back to mum and dad, he chops out your tongue. Steal something, he takes away your hands. He's that kind of a guy. Now, yes, sometimes he is depicted in blackface. Yes, if you do want to use his character, you might leave that out. But, also do remember, not everything exists in the lens of North American race relations. It is not designed to make fun of people. Adventures with Old Father Whipper, they write themselves. But here's my favourite one. I think this would actually be a really fun idea. A local necromancer or a local lich flies in once a year and he buys off the local townsfolk with money and with presents, and everyone likes him because it's new spades, it's a new oxen, it's a new cart, it's bloody fantastic. But he takes a crop of healthy new children each year, and his flesh golem, Father Whipper, does the dirty work. So the party can fight this dangerous lich, but maybe the townsfolk don't want to give up that many bribes. Maybe the townsfolk are pretty happy with this state of arrangement. I don't know. Anyway, Father Whipper, he's pretty cool. Calicanceroi, number 3, my faves. The Calicanceroi, which I've almost certainly said wrong, are a Greek race of goblin creatures that live deep down in the earth. They're actually all around the region, like they go all the way to Turkey and Anatolia and stuff, but they're all basically these creatures. Every year, these weird little goblins, they plan to chop down the world tree, which, as far as I know, isn't part of any Greek myth, but, that's okay. These things are a lot more, patchwork and piecemeal than what is presented to you in the encyclopedias. So anyway, so the Cali guys, they get close to chopping it down each and every year. But on the last days of the year, Christmas comes, and they're allowed up to the surface, and they're allowed to do evil. They only have 12 days they're allowed to do this, so they rush up and they waylay travelers, they steal babies, all that sort of stuff. A Turkish variant has them luring away people from fires into the cold, often pretending to be loved ones, and just the usual causing mischief, making the butter go wrong, all that sort of business. They're physically very grotesque, with an emphasis on being goaty and, how to say this, priapic, i.e., penisy creatures. So if you don't want a race of horrible monsters with erections in your game, that's probably okay. They also, I find this quite fascinating, they like to change babies into creatures like themselves. So mothers are constantly on watch during newborns and the 12 days of Christmas. And one of the great weaknesses of the Calicanceroi is that holy things destroy them instantly. There's a trick that the people would do where they try to get them to count past 2, because 3 is the holy number, 3 is the number of the Trinity. So if they say the word 3, explodo. So I think that you would want to load yourself up with holy symbols, holy relics, all that sort of stuff, and just remember prayers and have things to say that are religiously minded. I love the idea that the creatures almost cause an apocalypse each and every year is fascinating, but I'm not sure how you can spin that out into Christmas. Maybe you want to meet the creatures at a Christmas-themed adventure and then go after them. But parties might be hired to heal a baby who's been turned back into a goblin. Maybe you have to go and find it, discover which one used to be the baby, and then drag it back, and then figure out the ritual to return it. Maybe your party is hired to actually go into the ground and wipe out a nest of these Calicanceroi and save Christmas forever. Doesn't you do a campaign where you got to save Christmas? That'd be fun. Or maybe for an evil campaign, you might want to actually convince the Calicanceroi to give up their 12 days of holidays and stay down in the ground, because then they can destroy the world tree. That would be a fun adventure. Number 4, caroling, wassailing. Now, I'm Australian, we don't really have a tradition of caroling, and honestly, it seems awful to me. The idea of people knocking on your door and then you have to politely stare at them while they sing. Oh my God, just get off my property. I have a dog. But wassailing, going around town and singing a song in return for food or money, it's a big part of the European Christmas traditions. And indeed, it would seem to be a big part of why, for about 200 years in England, Christmas itself was contested and banned and reduced of importance in quite a political football. And part of this is that because often wassailers would demand food and drink from the rich, and if you didn't give it to them, they would bust in and take it. And we cannot have these dreadful paws wanting to have some food. That's just not on. And I think that this is just a simple bit of custom that would really strongly world build in your game. If there was a sort of a tradition of once a year, you began to notice this, like people coming around singing, concerts and things like that became more important, especially in D&D where bards and music is quite magical. So I think an adventure in which you have to outwit a band of murderous anarchist bards going town to town, house to house, stealing and robbing could be really, really fun. Or maybe you want to become those murderous anarchist bards, and it's the goal to wassail. And maybe there is a more than just getting money out of people and just robbing the rich. Maybe there's someone you need to get in front of. Maybe someone you need to sing for, to use magic, or even just to get into their house and case the joint. And I think that this is the best advice I'm ever going to give you. I've been a DM for 40 years. And this is me telling you, make your players sing. Do it. It will be hilarious. Anyway, wassailing adventure. Loads of fun. The Nutcracker and stories of the supernatural coming and taking us away are, as we just saw with our Kalimazzi goblin mates, an important part of Christmas. But let's talk about the Nutcracker because it's an important one. Based on the 1816 story The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by a guy called E.T.A. Hoffman. And if you haven't read Hoffman, especially if you like folklore and that sort of stuff, read him. He's fantastic. But in the original story, not the Tchaikovsky ballet, a 7-year-old girl named Marie cuts her arm open after she is startled by a vision of her twin Nutcracker coming to life. And the actual sort of visions that she then has is deeply wild and deeply psychedelic if you've never actually read it. And as she recuperates, her godfather, a guy by the name of Drosselmeyer, tells her a story of a man cursed with the ugliness of a nutcracker by a heartless queen. And this actual part of the story is fantastic. It's like deeply involved in a cool fantasy narrative. Marie eventually declares that she would love the nutcracker even if he was cursed to look like a creepy nutcracker. And that is what breaks the curse, and she ends up married to a handsome man. Of course, she is 8. But this Xmas notion, this Christmas notion of the divine touching the world, it's a part of this story. And it's not just the divine, it's also the supernatural. Goblin King, come and take me away right now. And you could do a fantastic adventure of where a girl is sucked into this sort of nutcracker fantasy where she's taken away and deposited into the demiplane of toys, or shrunk down, and now she has to deal with the politics of a fantastic mouse kingdom. Or maybe you could just take it that labyrinth sort of Christmas, and you go after a Fey Lord who has taken a little girl away into his magical land, and you need to bring her back before the stroke of midnight on the 25th, or she can never return to the mortal world again. Christmas is a time when the gates to other places open, and where the gods and the divinities and the supernatural touch our world. Remember that. So anyway, just a quick one. 5 Christmas things, 5 adventures, 5 bits of folklore. Merry Christmas, and I will see you next year. Bye now.